everybody. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And yesterday, I started a conversation with my friend Aaron Utecht, who is sitting right here. Aaron, hello once again.
Hello once again.
This is completely fake because we're cutting it right in the middle, knowing full well that we're talking too long and it has to be a two-parter. So we're just going to keep talking because I feel like we've got a lot that I want to still mine from this conversation about Matthew 19 and the rich kid who comes up to Jesus and is like, hey, what do I need to do to get eternal life? And then he and Jesus have this exchange that we're talking about right now. And I just want to let the conversation run as long as it runs, and that's why I'm posting it as a special bonus Saturday episode. So we're going to do this, and then Monday we'll get back to business as usual and spend some more time looking at this passage just with me. All right, so with that said, here's a little bit of music, and then we're going to pick up right where we left off in the conversation.
Bonus episode of the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast.
Sometimes if you go right at people, their defensive reflexes come up. And by the guy coming forward to Jesus, this isn't probably a private conversation. Now he's sort of stuck. Like, okay, you just pinpricked my balloon in front of everyone, and now I'm kind of on the hook. I have to either disqualify you as a teacher or accept what you say and go do something about it.
Why do you think this is a private conversation?
Well, it's recorded. Somebody else heard
Conversation with Nicodemus is recorded, and John.
Some people actually argue that the conversation with Nicodemus wasn't all that private. He came to him at night, but maybe not necessarily privately.
But surely we have other private conversations that are recorded. You seem pretty sure. Why do you think it's public?
Because the guy's trying to justify himself. He's not the kind of guy who's interested in getting the inside scoop privately. If you're going to proclaim your own righteousness, well, that's how the game is done. You don't do that privately.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I think that's a good read into the motives. Yeah, he's here looking for a pat on the head. You don't go do that in private, do you?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, good read. It's interesting, though, how this formula of God's righteousness, human not righteousness, and then somehow the righteousness of God being imparted to humans. Jesus has done a pretty masterful job of setting up that conundrum. The kingdom is beautiful. You want to be in. Righteousness is what it takes to be in. You don't have it. And even the very best of you don't have it. It's a gigantic crisis. It's a huge tease that he's put out here. And so now Jesus has crossed state lines at the beginning of chapter 19. He's going from Galilee into Judea. He does so after the community discourse and all of that business. And as he crosses into Judea, there are new people, new crowds, people who don't really know what to make of him but are excited about it or bringing their kids up in the previous passage to have him say something to them or bless them. And this guy, I would assume, is part of that same crowd. He hasn't seen what Jesus has been about. He hasn't been witness to the other miracles or teachings. And so he's just showing up too. And he's like, I've heard some rumors about this riddle, this conundrum, that the kingdom is awesome and you want to be in, but it takes righteousness to get in, but nobody is good enough. Well, maybe I'm good enough. I picture a kid who's been told that he's a special, special boy every single moment of his life by his special, special parents. And it seems like he earnestly believes that he's good enough.
He probably even won the Best Christian Award at his school growing up.
I see what you did there. Ladies and gentlemen who are here listening, what Aaron is referencing is something called the Timothy Award that I won at the Christian high school I went to for exemplary Christianness. It's something that in my friend circles I often make fun of because of not the ridiculousness of the award. It's really nice of them to have given that and to have prioritized that. It's more a mockery of my own nonsensical attempts at goodness that if you could watch a videotape of my high school years during which I won such an award, you would see quickly I do not deserve such an award. So Best Christian, I won it. Boom, I got the award. I got a plaque. It's in a tote somewhere in the attic. All of this to say, this guy is coming up with his Best Christian Award, metaphorically. And on the one hand, I think we can look at this guy and run with the metaphor I threw out at the beginning of our conversation, which is he's asking, like, what's the minimum that I have to do to get in? Because he's thinking of this as a transaction. I do X number of things. You give me X product. I need to satisfy certain requirements to make mom and dad happy so I can go back to goofing around and being a kid and not have to eat any more of this casserole that I don't want to eat. There's a childish understanding on display there, and I think that's one way to read it. I think another way to read it that's not necessarily mutually exclusive with that first way to read it is that this is somebody who feels like they can walk up to the problem and slay the dragon. They're the one who can walk up to the complex math equation that's been on the chalkboard at MIT in the 1950s all semester long, and only the elite mathematical student can walk up and solve it. And he strolls up there as a special trust fund boy, and he's like, I've got this thing, except he doesn't, and he embarrasses himself, and he clearly does not got this thing. And I'm with you. I think he probably did it in front of everybody because he was hoping everybody would see him walk up to the board and do it. It's just that the solution that I think he was offering to the board was, you have to do this certain X number of things to get in, and you all just aren't disciplined enough. But I am. I've kept all those commands that you've mentioned. But, Aaron, why hasn't he actually even kept the commands that are listed here in verse 18 or 19 from Jesus?
Well, Jesus is, without saying it, pointing him back to the first. He says, well, actually, you haven't. If you have other gods before God, then you can externally avoid murdering. I mean, I feel pretty good about that. I think I've kept that commandment too. I haven't murdered anyone.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Jesus,
that's not a hard one at all.
Jesus goes back to it, and surely you've heard it said, "Do not murder." But I say, if you've ever said "raka," or if you've ever said in your heart, "You fool," then you've committed murder in your heart. I mean, it's kind of a tantamount to that level of hatred or unrighteousness in your heart. And so Jesus, without saying so, is pointing back to all of that.
Yeah, and that supports my theory that now that we've crossed state lines into Judea, we're getting into a group of people who aren't tracking with him fully yet. It's like when somebody jumps in with an established circle of friends and they're just trying to feel their way out, carve out their niche, and they say stuff or celebrate stuff or joke about stuff that's already been well covered in that group. And everybody in the group is like that's already been addressed, and that's kind of awkward. But, you try to be welcoming and everything anyway. You don't want to be weird about it. I'm guessing there were people traveling with Jesus, if this exchange was public, when this rich young ruler walks up and starts saying this stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, I've kept all of that. I'm guessing there were people who were at the Sermon on the Mount who were there within earshot, and they were like, this isn't going to go well for you.
They kind of start to smile and
just
kind of wait for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, we were there too. We've been disabused of that notion for some time, but yeah, we all had to go through it. It's okay, man. Yeah. I wonder if that was present because, this was very pronounced teaching from Jesus. And if you go like top 10 things that everybody, Bible people or not, Christian or not, religious or not, know from the book of Matthew, some of those teachings about committing adultery by lusting after a woman in your heart. I mean, Jimmy Carter made that famous. Mm-hmm. Like some of these things have really entered into the common conversation, and I'm sure it really popped for them in the original audience as well when they heard it at the Sermon on the Mount. And, this guy just doesn't know yet. So he comes up and he's still operating with this old paradigm, which is I be good, we have a transaction, you have to give me heaven. There, did I solve the problem? But the broken thing in the equation is that the kid just doesn't understand that no degree of external obedience undoes the imperfection of the individual by comparison to a perfect eternal God. You can't perfect the imperfect. You can't unimperfect yourself through labor and external discipline. You're either 100% righteous and pure, or any percentage that isn't 100% is impure. The debate is just how impure, and at that point it's irrelevant because you don't stack up against the purity of God.
So by extension, maybe your analogy still works. The kid who doesn't want to eat the mushy broccoli on his plate,
which is reasonable.
If he says, Mom, I'll give you 5 bites, and she says, okay, you can go back to Atari after you eat 5 bites of mushy broccoli. Oh. And in his heart, he really loves his mom, but he hates broccoli. So he eats the whole thing, even licks the plate clean. He's done all the works, but in his mind, he hated every moment of it. And in his heart, if you will, was still turned against broccoli. even though he did all of the work. He cleaned his plate up.
I feel a darkness in my heart right now toward you for taking my analogy I felt pretty good about and making it better than what I had thought of. Like you're embarrassing me in front of the podcast. Say something stupid.
Sorry, man.
Say something stupid. Say something stupid.
I'm stumbling over
Come
words. How about
on.
that?
It should be easy to say something stupid. No, that's a great take, man. And you said so succinctly what I've been driving at here for the last few minutes of our conversation. He just doesn't get the equation. And it's a very hard equation to get. And so this is the part of the conversation I always come back to as we look at these anecdotes in Matthew. At first, I'm like, oh, man, look at the way the text is holding this guy out, is screwing it up. Yeah. And then the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, we're supposed to be empathetic. If we didn't know better and we were in the same spot as this kid was, we would assume that since our money bought us everything else, it would also buy us favor here. We would make the exact same mistake. But then Jesus cuts out from him the thing that makes him special, and that's his money and his position, his family name, his title, his lands, his holdings, whatever. Well, without that, I'm no one. Well,
that feels a little naked all of a sudden.
It does.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, kid doesn't feel like there's any reason that he should be allowed into the kingdom anymore. I think we usually read this and we catch the first level meaning, which is obviously there. Stuff is dangerous. Money can be the kind of thing that serves as a substitute God for something true and real, creates substitute security. You can almost pray the Lord's Prayer to money if you want to swap it all out for that. It's very tempting. So this guy liked money and he liked his stuff and he's sad because he was greedy. That's an easy narrative to go with, and I think it's there. But I think the second level narrative that is just as real as to what went wrong with this kid is that this takes away everything that makes him him. It takes away everything that made him worthy to be in the kingdom. And now his special little boy with money routine isn't there. Why would anybody love him? Why would he have any merit or any reason to be received into the kingdom?
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. And that really is entering the kingdom, is you strip away everything and you sort of lose your identity and get wrapped up with the king.
It's a scary invitation.
It's a scary invitation.
But the further we get into Matthew, the more that's what it looks like.
It's the best invitation.
Okay, but out of empathy toward normal humans and normal human thought, accomplishments make you you. Like the stuff I can do, the stuff I can be, the stuff I can say, the things I can achieve, the people I can beat at stuff, that makes you you. Like that's what I bring to the table. If I don't have any of that stuff, I'm going to have a real tough time shopping for circles of friends. If I can't communicate, if I can't contribute anything, if I don't do anything, if I don't have some special quirky power, I don't get invited to the superhero team unless I'm Hawkeye. I don't get invited to the superhero team, and I'm on the outside looking in, wishing I could be part of the cool club. But here, what you just said and what I think we're seeing in the text, I think it's pretty evident that none of your stupid stuff that scores you points everywhere else scores you points in the kingdom. And that, I can intellectually articulate that because I've spent a lot of time around Matthew, but I'm not sure if I can emotionally assent to that fully. That is very, very difficult for me.
I think it's difficult for all of us. It was difficult for him. And I think your insight is, putting a real human face on it. Sometimes Jesus really castigates people. Sometimes he really makes them look bad. I think here there is a definite level of softness with how he deals with the guy. He calls him out. He holds up the true kingdom to him. But he doesn't really call him on the carpet like he does with some of the Jewish leaders. It seems like this guy's in a genuine spot. And the invitation is hard. Lord, this is a hard teaching. Who can follow this? It's the whole narrative. That's what it is. Losing yourself, losing your life to find it. And so somehow all of those things, like you said, well, I'm good at this sport. I have these certain skills. I develop this, identity, and that gives me friends and social stuff. Somehow that doesn't go away, but it becomes the king's. And those talents and attributes, they become leveraged in a different way rather than sort of building my own name and reputation. So what you see happening here is this guy's having some of his stuff peeled away from him. And that is the challenge of discipleship, that we are constantly learning that all of the things that make us like you said, I play these sports, I have these skills, I live in this certain city, and I like the things that happen there. I like these hobbies, and that gives me, social cred. When I walk into the bike shop, I feel like one of the guys, and they all talk, well, what have you done lately? Those things don't go away, but they become the kings. And my identity is no longer in those things, but those sort of become part of this new relationship that I leverage those things towards, instead of building my own name and reputation, leverage them towards building his reputation. And so somehow we just continually grow in this equation of getting lost a little bit more and a little bit more all the time. We're just gradually, our self-worth is peeled away. And those things don't quit being realities for me, but I find my worth more and more in relation to the King and his kingdom.
I'm not devil's advocating here. I'm genuinely asking this in follow-up to what you're saying. There's a huge percentage of the people who are listening to this conversation right now who are not Christians, are not religious, are probably not even theists. They might say somewhere between maybe and definitely not on the question of God. They're here because they're super empathetic and they want to understand a wildly influential document and religion better. They want to understand their believing friends better. And as they are empathetic, I'm empathetic to them, because what you just described, to use the Christian phrase, that'll preach. I mean, that idea of the identity of the individual, which ultimately, apart from God, turns to dust and is meaningless the second the last person who knew your name utters your name for the last time. You're gone. It's over. But instead, your identity is swallowed up, consumed, integrated into the kingdom community, the kingdom, and who you are and what you do and what you contribute. That value is no longer found in you being remembered or what mark you make for yourself, but that meaning and that depth comes from union with Christ and participation in this kingdom. The identity comes from there. That sounds incredible when you're in. When you've looked at it and you're like, that makes a ton of sense. But I have to think, from the outside looking in, which is hard for me to picture because it's been a while since I've been there, it's incredibly intimidating. It's this all-in gambit. If you push all of your identity chips, your life chips to the middle of the table, and you're like, all right, I've never physically seen God, and I can't guarantee that all of this stuff is exactly as I've been told. I don't know the way I know other things in life, but I'm all in, and the only way to go in is all in. So here is everything about my identity and my ambitions and all of it. I think that's incredibly rightly intimidating on the front end. Is what I just said an accurate representation of the gambit?
I think so, and you're right. It's like, oh, wait, this is kind of high stakes all of a sudden. Like you're talking all or nothing, and I think that's how he lays it out. So we go back to the Sermon on the Mount. Lose your life for the sake of finding it. Come to the kingdom as a little child. That was the line. Actually, it was Luke's version of it that helped me get over the hump when I was in college to really become a Christian.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, I wanted all my intellectual questions resolved before I would bend my will to it. And I wouldn't say I ever heard voices or anything like some people claim, but I think the message that I got from the scriptures and that just the sense of God's attitude was, I don't owe you any explanation, but if you come to me, you'll find all the meaning that you need and more, and all the explanation you need and more. And I have found that to be true. But on the front end, yeah, I'm with you. If someone's listening to this and they feel like, yeah, I'm still weighing this out, hey, I'm sympathetic. It's a big thing. Jesus even commends that. Yeah, think wisely about joining the kingdom. Try to think it through as much as you can. And the thing that we find out is, well, I'm going to lay it all on the table and I'm in. Well, what do you know? I wasn't all in. I was holding back these other things in my life, or holding back these other things, and gradually we continue all throughout our lives. We realize that I'm still a pretty selfish guy, and and I want my things, and and
So it doesn't work?
it does work, but you realize that. So let's just say I actually did give up this guy in the picture. Let's say he did give up all his possessions, and he gave them to the poor, and he went and followed Jesus. And some people throughout the Middle Ages took this really seriously, and they actually did this. They went and became monks and stuff. Well, they get into the monastery, and they find out that Brother Lawrence in the cell next door has a corner cell with a window facing the east that gets the morning sun, and their cell doesn't have a window.
Brother Lawrence with his dirty window.
Yeah. You still have the problem of coveting. And so the nature within me still requires grace. And the thing you realize is, oh, silly me, I thought I had conquered this. So the thing works, but God's grace is just fresh all the time.
I got taught this when I was 2. This was the stuff that my parents read to me before I was born. My dad read the book of Matthew to me, knowing what my name would be, before I was born. This is not new material. I've been around this before, but I don't get it. This most basic equation melts my brain again and again and again. It has continually done so through my whole life in different ways, and it's doing it again right now listening to you talk about this. The idea of the most valuable thing in the world that you absolutely have to have, that you absolutely need, being unobtainable by self-promotion, self-discipline, and self. We don't run that equation with anything else in all of life ever, anywhere, ever. The idea of truly being in, to the degree that 100% I bring nothing to the table on this. If I am accepted into this new family of faith, it's not because I can hack a mainframe or I can shoot a bullet at great distances and always hit my target, or because I have tremendous strength or intellect. It has nothing to do with the thing that I bring to the table. I can make people laugh. I can run great distance. Nobody cares. In the kingdom, that isn't how it works. And maybe my trust of people and relationships is jaded or low, but it's hard for me to even picture an entity, a deity in this case, who would accept people wholeheartedly, completely, make them sons, daughters, heirs, agents, put his brand next to their brand, like what we're seeing in Matthew. It's really difficult for me to picture such a being, because the being I know best, me, wouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, we always think of God as some kind of better version of us. So part of this is what this, Jesus' life, the documents, what they're telling us, showing us is he's not anything like us. And like what you just said, he doesn't need any of my skills. In fact, all of those skills that I have, my cleverness, my ability to slay with dad jokes to my kids and embarrass them, whatever it is I think I'm good at, that God is the one who gave those things to me. So what can I give back to God, who has given me all of these abilities? And why would I expect anything less from God? If he's a God worth worshiping, he's not a God that I can wrap my mind around. If I can wrap my mind around and think I've figured it out, that's a God of my own making. And so the fact that we're continually befuddled by this, I think that's kind of the point, because it continues to drive us towards awe and worship. We just get lost in it and wonder, and then we come to the point of, wow, grace is bigger than I thought, and it's more awesome than I thought. And in that moment, when we find our will being more and more comfortable with that, I feel like even though Jesus' language is lose your life to find it, that's when we, in reality, start to become more human than ever. And all of my skills and abilities take on different meaning and a new life to them.
I'm going to unpack this passage a little bit more, I think, in the next conversation that I do. But I wanted to talk with you about this. I did have a secret agenda, and you delivered. Thank you. I wanted to talk with you about this because I was hoping the conversation would go right where it's gone, which is to a place where we act like we are on the rich young ruler side of this conversation. It feels like this is one of those 2 or 3 checkpoints in the Gospel of Matthew where you're supposed to assume the identity, the point of view of the person Jesus is talking with and run the equation for yourself. Where am I at with this? How am I like this guy? Why am I effectively asking the same question and in the same boat? And how does where I'm at in my understanding of this stack up with the reality of what Jesus has been teaching all along? And so thank you for gaming that out with me and for gaming it out with everybody who's thinking about it here. I think this is pretty deep water stuff. And I think this podcast needs more fart jokes. So I'm going to resume with that next time around. So as always, I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
Absolutely. The pleasure is mine just to get to talk through this stuff and to bounce ideas back and forth, wrapped up in wonder that we get to be a part of this story.
It's a weird equation. I guess my final thought would be to anybody who on the inside of faith or the outside of faith is going through Matthew with us and thinking about this and listening to the conversation we just had and finding that equation is very, very difficult to understand and internalize. I would say, well, I mean, hopefully we're all in good company here because it is challenging, but at least from a human perspective, it's one of the real central concepts of this entire notion of relationship between us and God and being in this kingdom that he keeps describing. Hopefully that's time well spent in this odd, very long conversational bonus episode, and we'll get back to more of jabbing at the text in the way we're used to next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.